Hi everyone. I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts, but here I am, trying to make sense of my life after everything I believed in came crashing down. It's a long story, but I'll start at the beginning. It all started last weekend when I decided to clean out the spare room in our house. We'd been meaning to turn it into a small home office, and I figured I'd surprise my wife, Claire, by getting a head start. While clearing out an old trunk in the corner, I found a plain, leather-bound diary. At first, I thought it was just an old journal she'd forgotten about, something harmless. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The first few pages were mundane, a grocery list here, notes about work there. But then, as I flipped further, the tone changed. The handwriting was still hers, neat and flowing, but the words were heavy with emotion. She wrote about another man, someone named A. The entries described secret meetings, stolen kisses, and feelings she'd been suppressing for years. I felt my stomach drop as the reality sank in. This wasn't just a passing crush. The affair had been going on for over 3 years. 3 years. Worse still, there were plans to run away together, leave everything behind, including me. I sat there on the floor, the diary shaking in my hands, unable to comprehend what I was reading. Page after page, entry after entry, I saw my wife in a light I'd never imagined. She spoke of how she felt trapped in our marriage, how I was comfortable but uninspiring. It was as though she'd rewritten our life together to justify what she was doing. And this, eh? She painted him as her savior, her chance at real happiness. I wanted to stop reading, but I couldn't. It was like watching a train wreck. You know it's going to be awful, but you can't look away. By the time I got to the last entry, dated just a week ago, my hands were trembling. She wrote about their next meeting, about how he'd promised her the world and how she believed him. She even mentioned a specific date, this coming Saturday. That's when they'd make their move. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the diary. Hours? Minutes? Time didn't feel real anymore. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. When Claire got home that evening, I couldn't look at her. She walked in with her usual smile, kissed me on the cheek, and asked what I wanted for dinner like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't been planning to leave me for years. I felt a surge of anger so strong I almost confronted her right then and there, but I held back. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. So here I am, writing this, trying to process what I've found and what I should do next. A part of me wants to confront her immediately, throw the diary on the table, and demand answers. But another part of me knows that would be too easy. If she's been lying for years, she's probably good at it. She'd find a way to twist the story, make herself the victim, and leave me questioning everything. I can't let her do that. Instead, I'm going to play it smart. I'm going to gather every piece of evidence I can, piece together the full story, and make sure that when the truth comes out, she has nowhere to hide. I don't know what this journey will look like, but I'll keep you updated. Maybe by sharing this, I can make sense of it all, or at least feel less alone. The next few days felt like I was living someone else's life. Claire acted the same as always, laughing at her favorite shows, texting friends, even asking me to help with a project she had for work. On the surface, nothing was different, but every time I looked at her, all I could think about was the diary, the lies, the betrayal. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I couldn't afford to tip her off. Instead, I started paying closer attention to her behavior. Every glance at her phone, every time she left the room to take a call, every moment she seemed distracted. It all felt magnified, like watching a play where I already knew the ending. By Thursday night, I'd made my decision. If Claire and A were planning to meet on Saturday, then I needed to be ready. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her walk out of my life without knowing the full extent of what she'd been hiding. I started by searching the house for anything else she might be hiding. It felt wrong to snoop, but after finding the diary, I figured all bets were off. I searched her nightstand, her desk, even the bathroom cabinets. At first, I found nothing out of the ordinary, until I opened the drawer in her vanity. There it was, a small, black box tucked under a stack of old receipts. I opened it to find a key, a safe deposit key. My heart raced as I turned it over in my hands, trying to figure out what it could be for. Claire had never mentioned having a safe deposit box. Why would she need one? The next morning, while Claire was at work, I called around to the local banks and struck gold on the third try. She had a safe deposit box at a branch downtown. I couldn't access it without her, but at least I knew where it was. That same day, I took another step I never thought I'd take. I followed her. After she left for work, I waited about 20 minutes, then got in my car and tailed her. It wasn't hard. She took the same route every morning, but instead of heading straight to her office, she made a detour to a cafe in the next town over. I parked a safe distance away and watched as she went inside. She wasn't alone. A man was already sitting at a corner table, waiting for her. Tall, well-dressed, with dark hair and an easy confidence that made my blood boil. He stood up as she approached, leaning in to kiss her cheek. They sat down, their heads close together, talking and laughing like two people who didn't have a care in the world. I snapped a few photos from the car. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. When Claire got home that evening, I acted like everything was normal. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and even suggested we watch a movie together. I agreed, playing along with her charade, all the while wondering how someone could be so deceitful and still look me in the eye. After the movie, she went to bed early, claiming she had a headache. I stayed up, staring at the photos I'd taken earlier, trying to make sense of it all. Who was this guy? How long had they been seeing each other? And what else had Claire been hiding from me? Saturday was fast approaching, and I knew I had to be ready. Whatever they were planning, I wasn't going to let it happen without a fight. This wasn't just about catching her in the act. This was about making sure she couldn't weasel her way out of it, couldn't twist the story to make me the bad guy. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. Saturday morning arrived, and with it came a gnawing sense of dread. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing I'd have to jump, but not sure how far the fall would be. Claire was unusually cheerful, humming to herself as she made breakfast. I sat across from her at the table, pretending to read the news on my phone while watching her every move. She was good, too good. You'd never guess she was planning to leave her husband for another man in just a few hours. So, what's your plan for today? I asked casually, forcing my voice to stay even. Oh, nothing much, she replied, not missing a beat. I might do some shopping, maybe grab coffee with Sarah. You? I nodded, hiding my anger. Sarah was her go-to excuse for everything. The phantom best friend she conveniently spent time with whenever her lies needed cover. Just running errands, I said. Might swing by the hardware store and fix that leaky faucet in the bathroom. She smiled, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. By mid-morning, she was out the door, her perfume lingering in the air like a mocking reminder of the life we'd built together. I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my keys and heading to the car. She didn't go shopping. She didn't meet Sarah. Instead, she drove straight to a hotel on the edge of town. The kind of place that catered to people who didn't want to be seen. I parked in the lot across the street and watched as she stepped out of her car, dressed in an outfit I'd never seen before. A sleek black dress that hugged her figure, paired with heels that clicked against the pavement. My stomach churned as a man stepped out of the hotel lobby to greet her. It was him, the man from the cafe. Hey! They embraced, and for a moment, the rest of the world seemed to blur. It was just the two of them, smiling and laughing like they'd won some twisted lottery. I snapped more photos, each one a dagger to my chest. But I couldn't stop. I needed this, needed proof that couldn't be denied or explained away. They went inside together, and I sat there in the car, staring at the hotel's glass doors. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. For a moment, I thought about barging in, confronting them in the lobby, and watching the color drain from Claire's face as her double life came crashing down. But I knew that wouldn't get me what I needed. Instead, I called the hotel. Front desk, a chipper voice answered. Yes, hi, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm trying to reach my wife, Claire. She just checked in with a man, probably under his name. I believe his first name is Alex. Let me check for you, the receptionist said, and I could hear the clacking of a keyboard in the background. I'm sorry, but I can't give out guest information. I expected that. Of course, I said. It's just, well, it's an emergency. Our son is in the hospital, and I can't get through to her. Please, can you just confirm she's there? There was a pause, and then, room 214. I'll transfer you. I hung up before she could connect the call. Room 214. I had everything I needed. That evening, Claire came home as if nothing had happened. She greeted me with a smile, kissed my cheek, and asked what I wanted for dinner. I played along, pretending I hadn't spent the day watching her world unravel. As she stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of pasta, I casually mentioned, I ran into Sarah today. Funny thing, she said she hasn't seen you in weeks. Claire froze, her back to me. For a split second, I thought I'd overplayed my hand. Oh, she said after a moment, her voice carefully neutral. I must have misunderstood her text. We've both been so busy lately. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. Why do you ask? I shrugged, meeting her gaze. No reason. Just thought it was strange, that's all. Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, brushing it off with a laugh. Let's eat, she said, handing me a plate. As we sat down to dinner, I couldn't help but marvel at her ability to lie so effortlessly. It was both impressive and heartbreaking. But she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know that the life she'd so carefully constructed was about to come crashing down. Sunday morning arrived, and the weight of what I'd learned sat heavy on my chest. I couldn't look at Claire without seeing her in that hotel lobby, laughing and smiling with him. The life we had, the memories we'd built, it all felt tainted, like a cruel joke I hadn't been let in on. Claire, of course, acted as if nothing had changed. She spent the morning on the couch with her coffee and a book, her legs curled beneath her like she didn't have a care in the world. Meanwhile, I was replaying every moment of the past few years in my mind, searching for the signs I'd missed. Had she been lying from the beginning? Or was there a time when she truly loved me? I couldn't stay in the house with her any longer. I needed air, space to think. I'm heading out for a bit, I said, grabbing my jacket. Claire glanced up, her brow furrowing slightly. Everything okay? Yeah, I lied. Just need to clear my head. She didn't press further, which only fueled my anger. How could she not sense that something was wrong? Or was she so confident in her lies that she didn't even care? I drove aimlessly for a while, my thoughts racing. Eventually, I ended up in front of the bank where her safe deposit box was stored. The key I'd found in her vanity was in my pocket, a silent weight that felt heavier than it should. I didn't know what I expected to find, but something told me the answers I needed were in that box. I walked into the bank, the air-conditioned lobby eerily quiet. At the desk, a woman greeted me with a professional smile. Good morning. How can I help you? I'd like to access my wife's safe deposit box, I said, sliding the key across the counter. Her smile faltered. I'm sorry, sir, but both parties listed on the account need to be present to access the box. My jaw tightened. Of course. Claire's secrets were well protected. I forced a smile. Understood. Thank you. As I left the bank, frustration bubbled inside me. I was so close, but still in the dark. That evening, Claire suggested we watch a movie together. Something light, she said, curling up on the couch beside me. It's been such a stressful week. The audacity of her words made my stomach churn. Stressful? For her? Sure, I said, forcing a smile. The movie played in the background, but I wasn't paying attention. Instead, I watched Claire out of the corner of my eye, studying her movements, her expressions. She seemed so at ease, as though the double life she was leading didn't weigh on her at all. At one point, she caught me staring. What? She asked, laughing softly. Do I have something on my face? I shook my head, the corners of my mouth lifting in a fake smile. No, just thinking how lucky I am. The words tasted bitter on my tongue, but they had the desired effect. Claire's cheeks flushed slightly, and she reached out to squeeze my hand. You're sweet, she said, her voice soft. I wanted to pull my hand away, to tell her exactly how I felt, but I didn't. Not yet. After Claire went to bed that night, I stayed up, staring at the ceiling and replaying the events of the weekend in my head. The diary, the photos, the hotel. I had all the pieces, but I still didn't know how to fit them together. One thing was certain. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. The next morning, I called my best friend, Kevin. "Hey man," I said when he picked up. "You got a minute?" "Of course," he replied. "What's up?" "It's Claire," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I think. No, I know she's been cheating on me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Jesus, Ethan," Kevin said finally. "Are you sure?" I told him everything, about the diary, the photos, the hotel. By the time I finished, my hands were trembling, but I felt a strange sense of relief. Kevin let out a low whistle. "Man, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say." "I don't either," I admitted. "But I need your help. I need to figure out what to do next." Kevin didn't hesitate. "Whatever you need, I'm here." That conversation was the first step toward reclaiming control. For the first time since I found the diary, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. As I hung up the phone, I made a promise to myself. Claire might think she's in control, but she has no idea what's coming. By Monday, my anger had turned into something sharper, colder. The betrayal still burned, but now there was a purpose behind it. I was done sitting in the shadows while Claire and her lover carried on as if I didn't exist. I spent the day gathering every piece of evidence I had. Photos of Claire and A at the cafe, the hotel visit, the diary entries. I scanned them, backed them up to a secure drive, and printed copies for good measure. I wanted to make sure I had everything I needed when the time came to confront her. But confrontation wasn't enough. Not yet. That evening, I waited until Claire went to bed before sneaking into her office. She had a home workstation for her freelance consulting work, and I knew she kept a lot of her personal files there. I logged into her computer using the password I'd seen her type countless times, our wedding date. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her email inbox was a goldmine. Among the usual work correspondence and promotional junk were dozens of messages from A. His real name, I learned, was Andrew Scott. They'd been emailing each other for years. Messages filled with inside jokes, plans for their secret rendezvous, and declarations of love. I copied everything. Then I moved to her browser history. She'd been careful, clearing most of her searches, but I found a few traces she hadn't erased: travel websites, articles about starting over in a new city, and, most damning of all, a bookmarked page for divorce lawyers. My stomach twisted as I stared at the screen. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to erase me from her life entirely. The next morning, I called Kevin again. "I need your help," I said. "You name it," he replied without hesitation. "I want to follow her again," I explained. "But this time, I want someone else watching too. I can't do this alone." Kevin agreed to meet me that afternoon. We parked a few blocks from Claire's office, waiting for her to leave. When she finally came out, she wasn't alone. Andrew was with her. Kevin let out a low whistle. "That him?" "Yeah," I said through clenched teeth. We followed them at a safe distance as they drove to a park on the outskirts of town. It was a quiet spot, mostly empty this time of year, with trails winding through the woods. They parked, got out, and began walking hand in hand down one of the paths. Kevin and I stayed in the car, using a pair of binoculars to keep an eye on them. "They're not even trying to hide it," Kevin muttered. "No," I agreed, my voice cold. "They're not." That night, I sat down and drafted a letter. It wasn't for Claire. It wasn't for Andrew. It was for Andrew's wife. I'd found her name and address in one of the emails Claire had sent, an angry rant about how Andrew couldn't get his act together and leave his wife already. Her name was Megan, and according to Claire, she had no idea what her husband had been up to. The letter was short and to the point. I included a few of the photos I'd taken, along with screenshots of the emails between Claire and Andrew. I didn't embellish or editorialize. I just laid out the facts. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. I sealed the envelope and set it on the counter, my heart pounding. The next morning, I mailed the letter. I didn't know what would happen when Megan received it. I didn't know if she believed me, or if she'd confront Andrew, or if it would all blow up in my face. But I did know one thing. Claire and Andrew's perfect little fantasy was about to get a dose of reality. When Claire got home that evening, She was in a good mood. "Hey," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "How was your day?" "Busy," I replied, forcing a smile. She didn't notice the tension in my voice, didn't see the storm brewing beneath the surface. For the rest of the evening, I played my role, the loving husband, the clueless fool. But in my mind, I was already preparing for what came next. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. 2 days after I mailed the letter, I got a phone call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Hello?" I said cautiously. There was a pause on the other end, and then a woman's voice. "Is this Ethan?" My stomach dropped. "Yes." "Who's this?" "This is Megan Scott," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I think we need to talk." We met that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. Megan was already seated when I arrived, a petite woman with tired eyes and an air of quiet desperation. She looked up as I approached, clutching her cup like it was a lifeline. "Ethan?" she asked. I nodded, sliding into the chair across from her. "Thanks for meeting me." She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I got your letter," she said, pulling it out of her bag. I don't even know where to start." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I realized she was holding back tears. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "I know this can't be easy to hear, but you deserve to know." She nodded, her hands trembling as she unfolded the letter. I thought Andrew was acting strange lately, distant, but I never imagined." Her voice trailed off, and she stared at the photos I'd included, her face crumpling. For a moment, I thought she was going to break down, but she took a deep breath and steadied herself. "Thank you," she said quietly, meeting my eyes, "for telling me the truth." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "What are you going to do?" she asked after a moment. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "I've been gathering evidence, trying to figure out the best way to handle this." She nodded, looking down at her coffee. "Me too." As I drove home, I couldn't stop thinking about Megan. She seemed so fragile, so blindsided by what was happening. It reminded me of how I'd felt when I first found Claire's diary, like the ground had been ripped out from under me. But there was something else, too. A quiet determination in her eyes, a resolve that told me she wasn't going to let Andrew get away with this. It made me feel a little less alone. That night, Claire came home late. "I had to work late," she said as she walked through the door, her tone casual. I didn't respond right away, just watched her as she kicked off her shoes and set her purse on the counter. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Yeah," she said, letting out a tired sigh. "I'm exhausted." I nodded, fighting the urge to confront her then and there. But I knew better. Instead, I waited until she went to bed before grabbing my phone and texting Megan. "Me? Did you talk to him?" It took a few minutes, but she replied. "Megan, yes." "Me? What did he say?" "Megan, he denied it at first. Said you were lying, that the photos were fake. But when I showed him the emails, he couldn't keep up the act." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. "Me? What now?" "Megan." I told him to pack his things and leave. Her next message came a few seconds later. "Megan, he said Claire was planning to leave you soon, that they were going to start fresh together." My blood ran cold. I didn't reply right away, my mind racing. So, they weren't just having an affair. They were planning a new life together, one that didn't include Megan or me. The next morning, I woke up to find Claire already gone. She'd left a note on the counter, had an early meeting. "Back late tonight. Love you." The words felt like a slap in the face. I grabbed my phone and called Kevin. "We need to move fast," I said when he answered. "Say the word," he replied. That evening, while Claire was working late, Kevin and I met at a bar downtown to go over the plan. "We're not just going to let this slide," Kevin said, slamming his beer on the table. "She thinks she's playing you, but she's about to find out how wrong she is." I nodded, my resolve hardening. We spent hours going over the details, making sure everything was airtight. By the time I got home, I was exhausted but determined. Claire wasn't just going to walk away from this. By the time Friday rolled around, everything was in place. I'd spent the last few days preparing, gathering evidence, and working out every detail of what was about to unfold. Claire had no idea what was coming. That morning, as she got ready for work, she hummed a tune under her breath, completely oblivious. Big plans for today? I asked casually, sipping my coffee. She glanced at me in the mirror, her expression calm. Just the usual grind. Meetings all day. I nodded, hiding my smirk behind the mug. Have a good one, I said as she grabbed her bag and kissed me on the cheek. You too, she replied, her voice as sweet as honey. Once she was gone, I picked up my phone and texted Megan. Today's the day. Megan, let me know how it goes. Good luck. I arrived at the hotel just after lunch. It was the same place I'd seen Claire and Andrew meet before, the same lobby where their betrayal had been so brazenly on display. Kevin was already waiting in the parking lot when I pulled in. Ready? He asked, his tone serious. Ready, I replied. We'd timed it perfectly. Claire and Andrew's usual routine had become predictable. Meet at the hotel, check in, and spend a few hours in their little fantasy world. I waited in my car until I saw Claire's car pull into the lot. She stepped out, dressed to impress in a sleek outfit that screamed anything but business meeting. A few minutes later, Andrew arrived, his polished demeanor making my blood boil. I watched as they greeted each other with a kiss before disappearing inside. Let's go, I said to Kevin, my voice cold. We walked into the lobby and approached the front desk. I need to speak with the manager, I said, flashing my most serious expression. The receptionist hesitated, her smile faltering. Is something wrong? It's about a guest, I replied. It's urgent. A few minutes later, the manager appeared, a middle-aged man with a no-nonsense air. What can I do for you, gentlemen? He asked. I leaned in, lowering my voice. My wife and her lover just checked into one of your rooms. I have proof they've been meeting here regularly, and I need to confront them. Quietly. The manager's eyes widened slightly, but he maintained his composure. I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out information about our guests. I expected that. I'm not asking for information, I said, pulling out a small stack of photos, the ones of Claire and Andrew entering the hotel on previous occasions. I'm asking for a little discretion while I deal with this. The manager studied the photos, his jaw tightening. Finally, he nodded. Which room are they in? Room 218. Kevin and I made our way upstairs, my heart pounding with every step. When we reached the door, I paused, taking a deep breath. This is it, Kevin said, his hand on my shoulder. You've got this. I nodded, steeling myself. Then I knocked. There was a long pause, and then the door opened just enough for Andrew to peek out. His expression shifted from confusion to panic in an instant. What the hell? He started, but I didn't let him finish. I shoved the door open, forcing him back into the room. Claire was standing near the bed, her face draining of color as she saw me. Ethan, she stammered, what are you doing here? I closed the door behind me, my eyes locked on hers. What am I doing here? That's rich, Claire. I could ask you the same question. Andrew tried to step between us, his hands raised defensively. Look, man, I think you need to calm down. Don't, I snapped, my voice sharp enough to make him flinch. You don't get to talk. Claire reached out, her voice trembling. Ethan, please, let me explain. Explain? I laughed bitterly, pulling out the folder of evidence I'd brought. Go ahead, Claire. Explain these. I threw the photos and emails onto the bed, watching as her face crumpled. This isn't what it looks like, she said weakly, tears welling up in her eyes. Save it, I shot back. I know everything. The diary, the emails, the hotel. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Andrew stepped forward again, his jaw tightening. This is ridiculous. I turned on him, my anger boiling over. You don't get to call this ridiculous. You destroyed your family for this. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Claire sank onto the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. Ethan, I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry? I said, my voice cold. You're only sorry you got caught. I left the room without looking back, Kevin following close behind. As we walked out of the hotel, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, relief. This wasn't the end, not by a long shot. But it was the beginning of the end for Claire and Andrew's fantasy. That night, I barely slept. The confrontation at the hotel replayed in my mind on an endless loop. Claire's shocked expression, Andrew's panicked attempts to defend himself, the bitter satisfaction of watching their little fantasy collapse under the weight of reality. By morning, the weight of everything hit me like a freight train. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Claire hadn't come home. I didn't expect her to. I figured she was with Andrew, trying to salvage what was left of their twisted relationship. The thought made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to push it aside. I had bigger things to focus on. I called Kevin, who answered on the first ring. "You okay?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I need your help. Again." "Say the word," he said without hesitation. We spent the next few hours organizing everything I had on Claire and Andrew. The photos, the emails, the hotel records, even the screenshots of Claire's searches for divorce lawyers. I wanted everything in one place, ready for whatever came next. Once we were done, Kevin leaned back in his chair, letting out a low whistle. "You've got enough here to bury them," he said, shaking his head. "Good," I replied. "What's the plan?" he asked. I hesitated, staring at the folder on the table. "I don't know yet, but I'm not letting them walk away from this without consequences." That afternoon, I got a text from Megan. "He came crawling back this morning. Said it was over with Claire." My chest tightened as I read her words. "Me? Do you believe him?" "Megan, not for a second. But I made it clear he's not welcome here." I stared at the screen, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me felt vindicated. Andrew's life was falling apart, just like mine. But another part of me felt hollow. None of this was bringing me peace. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Claire standing on the porch, her face pale and drawn. She was holding a small overnight bag, and her eyes were rimmed with red. "Ethan," she said quietly, "what do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. She flinched but didn't look away. "I need to talk to you. Please." For a moment, I considered slamming the door in her face. But instead, I stepped aside, letting her in. She walked into the living room, setting her bag down by the couch. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that." "Why?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Why now? Because Andrew's wife kicked him out? Because your plan to start a new life together fell apart?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, it's not about him. It's about us. I made a mistake, Ethan. A terrible mistake. But I want to fix it. I want to fix us." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the silence. "Fix us? Claire, there is no us. Not anymore." "Please," she whispered, stepping closer. "I'll do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. Just don't give up on me. On us." Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, this woman I'd once loved so deeply, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Finally, I spoke. "You didn't just betray me," I said quietly. "You betrayed everything we built together. You lied to me, to my face, for years. And now you want me to pretend that never happened?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I'm begging you to let me try." I let out a long breath, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "I don't know if I can," I admitted. "I don't even know if I want to." Claire stayed in the guest room that night, her presence in the house a constant reminder of the life I'd lost. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. Did I want to fix things? Could I? Or was this just another manipulation? Another attempt to control the narrative? One thing was certain. The storm wasn't over yet. The next few days were a strange limbo. Claire was walking on eggshells, cooking dinner, cleaning the house, and trying to act like the perfect wife. But every time I looked at her, all I could see were the photos and emails, the lies. We had a conversation one evening after she insisted on cooking my favorite meal. What exactly are you hoping for, Claire? I asked, setting my fork down. She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes. I just want us to get back to the way we used to be. That's impossible, I said bluntly. There's no going back. Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel sympathy. This was her mess, not mine. While Claire clung to the hope of reconciliation, Megan wasn't as forgiving. She called me one afternoon, her voice steely. "I've filed for divorce," she said. "Andrew isn't worth salvaging." I admired her strength, but it also forced me to confront my indecision. Megan was cutting ties and moving on. So why was I hesitating? "You're doing the right thing," I told her. "I hope you do too," she replied. One night, I overheard Claire on the phone. She was in the guest room, her voice low and frantic. "I don't know what to do," she said. "He won't talk to me. I feel like he's slipping away." I knew who she was talking to, Andrew. The realization hit me like a freight train. Even now, after everything, she was still reaching out to him. I recorded the call as evidence, knowing I might need it later. The next morning, I confronted her. "I heard you talking to Andrew last night," I said, watching as her face drained of color. "What?" she stammered. "No, I wasn't." "Don't lie to me, Claire," I snapped, pulling out my phone and playing the recording. She collapsed into the chair, burying her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know why I keep doing this." I didn't respond. Her words meant nothing now. "I'm done," I said finally. "You need to leave." Her head shot up, panic in her eyes. "No, Ethan, please." "It's over, Claire," I said, my voice cold. "Pack your things and go." Claire moved out that weekend. Watching her leave, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Kevin came over that night, bringing a six-pack and a pep talk. "You did the right thing," he said, clinking his beer against mine. "I know," I replied, though my voice wavered. "But it still hurts." "It will," he said, "but it won't last forever." A week later, Megan and I met for coffee again. This time, she looked lighter, freer. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "If you hadn't sent that letter, I might still be living in denial." "I think we helped each other," I said with a small smile. We talked for hours, sharing stories and even laughing about the absurdity of it all. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. It's been 6 months since Claire left. The divorce is finalized, and I've started rebuilding my life. Megan and I still talk occasionally, though it's more friendly than anything romantic. We've both been through enough to know that rushing into something new isn't the answer. As for Claire, I heard through mutual friends that she and Andrew didn't last. Apparently, his promises of a perfect future were as hollow as hers. Looking back, I realized the betrayal didn't just break me. It forced me to grow, to face hard truths about myself and the life I was living. I'm still healing, but I'm stronger now. And for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. Thank you for listening. If you are going through something similar, just know that it will get better. You are stronger than you think.